In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon His last and beloved Messenger Muhammad, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all. The title of this presentation is Explaining Bose-Einstein Condensate from the Guidance of the Quran. So, in this presentation I will show how Allah God Almighty in the last revelation to people can teach us all the branches of knowledge in a way superior to that of people, the knowledge of people. And this is just an example about Bose-Einstein or Einstein Condensate. Now, the first step is to say, what is this Bose-Einstein? By the way, it can be the name Einstein can be pronounced Einstein or Einstein, and I believe that the correct pronunciation is Einstein because it's a German name. So anyway, this Bose-Einstein condensate, it's a phenomenon in physics. I will explain first what is this phenomenon and how can we learn it and devise practical applications from it from the guidance of the Quran. Firstly, what is this phenomenon? As you can see on the screen, we are used to in matter that to say that it's composed of atoms and it can be found in solid or liquid or gas state. Now the three pictures you see on the screen in matter in a solid state or liquid or gas state, they all share a certain kind of property, is that we always have atoms as distinct objects in matter. Like in all cases, we always have, this is an atom, we say this is an atom, a certain entity or a certain object in matter. Now what Bose-Einstein theorized, or put a theory, that if you cool down matter to almost absolute zero, meaning that there is almost no heat, no thermal energy whatsoever, in that condition they put a theory that these atoms will stop behaving like certain objects in a certain location. They will be like a wave. They become like a wave or a coherent fluid, like it becomes like a fluid state, not like a matter. They become like a wavy kind of medium. So meaning that matter as we know it, it will not behave as like rigid structures or rigid, this is an atom. It will become like a fluid kind of state or like a wavy structure. So as you can see, here are some photos. Here we have the theory, the hypothesis or the theory of Bose-Einstein condensate. Now, people in this day and age, they did an experiment and they found out exactly that when you cool down matter to that level of temperature or nearly no thermal energy whatsoever, the atoms stop behaving like at a certain location. They start behaving like a wave kind of fashion. Now this kind of behavior is quite puzzling for physicists and scientists. It's very puzzling. Why should atoms behave in this fashion? Why they should become like a wave or like let's say a fabric or a fluid? Now, as I said, they put theories and hypotheses. Now the problem with these theories is that there is no kind of definite answer as to why matter behaves like this. And also when there is not that much knowledge about this topic, they start using big words like quantum coherence and these kind of just big terminologies that scares people off. And they just put this quantum coherence. And as I said, the reason they use these big words because they really do not understand it that much. Because when you understand something thoroughly, you use simple words to convey the information. But when you say, for example, solitone waves, quantum coherence, just a handful of people that understand this. Now, one of the miracles of the Quran, that as you can see, when Allah teaches you something in the Quran, He teaches you big concepts in very simple terms and very simple language. Allah does not use big words that confuses people and scare people off. That's one of the miracles of the Quran, the way Allah teaches you. Okay, let's begin by explaining Bose-Einstein Condensate from the Quran. And as you can see, in just a few verses, we can learn understand this phenomenon, and not only understand it, but also devise practical applications from it. So, the first verse to ponder upon, it's the key verse to understand this phenomenon. It's verse number 30 of chapter 21 of the Quran, which reads, "Have not those who disbelieve known that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one weaved fabric? Then Allah God tore them apart. And Allah God has made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe?" So, here Allah God Almighty is telling us about how He created the universe, the heavens and the earth. And in the presentation you will see how this links to Bose-Einstein Condensate. Just bear with me, please. So Allah is telling us here how He created the heavens and the earth. And He's telling us that in the Quranic verse, "Have not those who disbelieve known that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one weaved fabric?" This is the translation, the English translation for the Arabic text. So Allah is telling us that the universe as we see it today, the beginning of it was one weaved fabric. So the universe was like a fabric, like a weaved fabric. That's the beginning of the universe. It was a one entity, one piece of a fabric. Now the word fabric, if you go and think about it more deeply, and you think what is the main kind of constituent, or what is the main building block of a fabric, like this fabric, it's a string. So in other words, Allah is telling us that the basic unit of creation, it's a string weaved together to produce a fabric. Now this string I explained in previous presentations, but just to give you a quick a summary for it, the basic unit of creation, as you can see on the screen, it's 3 strings weaved together. 3 strings weaved together. This is the basic unit of creation. And these strings, or weaved ropes, they are joined together to produce the fabric of space and the fabric of the universe. And this links to another verse in the Quran, in chapter 51 verse 7, where Allah says, "And the heaven containing weaved ropes." So Allah is telling us that the heaven, space, and any heaven meaning any volume surrounding a central object, like the heaven of the earth, the space, it contains weaved ropes. So we learn from this, as I said, that at the beginning of the creation of the heaven and the earth, the universe was a fabric of vibrating strings of energy. So it's a fabric of vibrating weaved strings of energy. That is the beginning of everything, the kind of the beginning of the universe. One entity, again, of vibrating strings linked together to produce like a fabric of energy. So let's continue in the verse. Then Allah says, "Then Allah God tore them apart." So what does this mean? So this fabric, this one, when the universe was a one kind of piece of fabric, Allah then tore them apart, meaning that this fabric was torn apart. Let's understand this, and let me give you a very simple example. You can see it on an everyday basis. Suppose that you have water. Now, in a cup, let's say. Now, water is like a fabric. It's like a weaved fabric together. Suppose that you want to separate water. You want to separate this fabric. Now, the simplest way to do it is to heat water, to provide thermal energy. Now, when you heat water, the molecules in water, they start being torn apart from the liquid water. So in other words, the simplest way to tear up a fabric is to provide thermal energy. So we learn from this that Allah God Almighty utilized thermal energy in the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth to tear up this initial fabric of vibrating strings, providing thermal energy, maybe by an explosion or other methods, just providing thermal energy. Now, what thermal energy does in this case, it tears up these vibrating strings into kind of lumps or kind of different parts. So a part of these vibrating strings become the earth, the sun, the other planets. We have, just to summarize again, we have at the beginning fabric of vibrating strings providing thermal energy. They are torn apart. They then provide the kind of the material for the creation, for the earth, the sun, the other planets, and the other objects in the creation. Now, in order to expand the universe and to maintain the relative positions between these different parts, there must be always thermal energy. And the way Allah God Almighty maintains this using stars. So if we think about stars as providers of thermal energy, the location of the stars in the universe, one of their functions that they keep the distances between these torn pieces of energy or pieces of vibrating strings, they keep them at certain distances, maintaining the structural integrity of the universe. Now, if we think about this verse in the Quran to explain this further, verses 7 and 9 from chapter 77 of the Quran, which read, "Surely what you are promised must come to pass. Then when the stars lose their lights, and when the heaven is cleft asunder." Here Allah God Almighty is telling us some of the affairs of the Day of Judgment, that one of the things that Allah will do on the Day of Judgment, that He will put out the stars, that the stars will be no more. That's one of the affairs of the Day of Judgment. So if we think about this, now what will happen if the stars lose their light? Based on what I just said, when the stars are put out, the source of thermal energy in the universe will be removed. There will be no more, meaning that the universe will lose its heat, its thermal energy. Okay, we now understand from the Quran that the way this universe maintains its relative position, its structural integrity, the way it still expands using these stars. So what will happen when they are put out? The temperature will become absolute zero. There is no thermal energy. So these pieces will come back, they shrink, will come back to the initial fabric that they were produced from. Once more, when there is absolute zero in the universe, there is no thermal energy, the universe will shrink, and these pieces will come back together, become one fabric. So everything will become like a fabric, a vibrating fabric. So I think now you start to get the idea. What does this have to do with Bose-Einstein Condensate? Bose-Einstein Condensate tells us that when it's absolute zero, everything will be kind of like a wave, like a fabric, like a fluid. And the Quran tells us that at the beginning everything was a fabric, vibrating strings, and the way it's in this way we see it is due to heat. So when there is no heat, it will go back to its original shape. Okay, and this kind of deduction, it's in the Quran in a very, very beautiful way. In chapter 21, verse 104, Allah says, this translation, And the day when Allah God shall roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books. As Allah God began the first creation, Allah shall repeat it. And the promise binding upon Allah, truly Allah shall do it. Now this verse is very, very beautiful. Allah is telling us that it's a promise of Allah God Almighty that on the day of judgment, He will roll the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books. What does this mean? Let me explain. Here we have a folder containing papers. A folder containing papers. Now at the beginning of creation, the whole universe was like a fabric, one fabric. Then Allah utilized thermal energy to tear up this fabric, like papers being torn out of this folder. And each paper constitutes the material, for example, for creation of the earth, the sun, the objects in creation. And the way these papers, the relative position for these papers maintained by thermal energy. On the day of judgment, when Allah puts out the stars, there is no thermal energy, the universe will shrink back. So these papers will come back to this folder and be closed. So if we go back to the verse, and the day when Allah God shall roll up the heavens like a scroll rolled up for books. As Allah began the first creation, Allah shall repeat it. So as Allah began the creation of the heavens and the earth, having one fabric being torn apart, Allah will repeat it, meaning that the whole pieces of torn fabric or the pieces of the universe will come back to, they shrink and will come back to the first state, being like a fabric. It will be closed and it will return to the first state from which the universe was created. It's very, very beautiful kind of verse in the Quran. In one verse, Allah tells you the story of creation and how everything will end. So I think we get the idea how to explain Bose-Einstein Condensate, because the way the universe at the beginning was, with no thermal energy, it was a fabric, like a water, fluid state, one fabric. Then when thermal energy was initiated, we have distinct pieces, like atoms at different locations. We have atoms, different kind of parts. Okay, I would like to explain this further. If we go to the level of the atom, I tried with the help of Allah God Almighty to explain this from the big perspective, like the universe. Now let me explain it in another way, going to the level of the atom. Now in other presentations I talked about the atom and how to understand from the Quran. Now in order not to make this presentation too long, I will tell you the main points we learn from the Quran about the atom and the structure of the atom and the function of the atom, without going into how I derived this knowledge from the Quran. If you want to know that, please visit my website, you will see the details. Just give you the points, just not to make this presentation too long. Okay, now as you can see, we can learn from the Quran that the atom is composed of a central object surrounded by 7 heavens or 7 layers containing weaved strings, weaved vibrating strings. And we learn from the Quran that the way atomic bonding occurs is that these weaved strings in one atom links with the other, and you have an attractive pull, like gravitational pull, between the two atoms. So we have an attractive force indicated here by the red arrows. Now Allah says in the Quran in chapter 15 verse 19 the following: and the earth Allah God spread out and placed therein fair mountains, and caused to grow therein all kinds of things in due proportion. So Allah is telling us that His creation is balanced. He created everything in a balanced state. So if I apply this to the atom, in order for the atoms to maintain the relative position, the attractive force must be countered by a repulsive force. So we have the attractive force due to the linking weaved ropes in red, and we have a repulsive force due to magnetic repulsion between the atoms indicated by the blue arrows. So these are equal and opposite forces. Now, suppose that we cool down the atoms to absolute zero, which means that we reduce the vibration of the atoms, which produces the magnetic repulsion. So one of the forces will be lost, which is the magnetic repulsion between the atoms. So what will happen here, that all the atoms will shrink and will link together due to their vibrating ropes in their heavens. So the whole atomic structure will become like a weaved fabric, like a fluidic state of vibrating strings. So everything will become like a wave vibrating, a vibrating wave. So as you can see here, this is just a symbol for what will happen. Everything will become like a fabric. So the atoms will no longer be the way we know them, like distinct objects in matter. They will become like a fabric of vibrating strings, because that's their original state. What we see about the atom is due to the thermal energy that separates these vibrating strings into lumps. Becomes like a lump here and a lump here of vibrating strings, and that's what we call an atom. So actually an atom is a concentration of vibrating strings in a certain space. But when the thermal energy is removed, it links with other atoms, becomes like a one fabric, one wave, one fluidic kind of state. And that correlates exactly with what the theory of Bose-Einstein condensation and the way people proved it by cooling matter to very low temperatures. So we saw, brothers and sisters, how from the guidance of the Quran, in a matter of minutes, we can understand what people think about very complicated science. So this is one of the miracles of the Quran, how Allah teaches you everything from the Quran without needing Bose or Einstein or Johnson or Skinner. Because Allah wants the believer to be the teacher of others and the one having dignity. And you will never, as a believer, have dignity if you are always reliant and you always need others for knowledge. You need to be self-sufficient in knowledge. And the only way to do that is if you have a source of knowledge independent of people. And we have that, and it's the Quran, the last revelation of Allah God to people. It's a book containing knowledge of the Creator, which is far superior to any knowledge that people can come up with their guesswork, with conjecture, with their trial error techniques, with their experimentation and other methods. You have the right answer from the first time. Why do you want to waste your life in pursuing something that you might find at the end that it's pointless, like the theory of evolution or other theories? You have the correct information from the first time in the Quran. And to know more details about this topic, please visit my website at www.quran-miracle.com, and you can email me at zaidquran@gmail.com, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you all.